This Sunday, February 26th, at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, the Winnipeg Chamber Music Society will be presenting the third concert of their 2022-23 season. Featuring the music of Ravel, Prokofiev, Leclerc, and Moshkovsky, this concert will showcase two of Winnipeg's finest violinists, Gwen Hobig, concertmaster of the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra, and her stand partner, associate concertmaster Carl Stobbe. The pianist for this concert will be David Moroz, who is the chair of the piano department at the University of Manitoba. And joining me here in our Classic 107 studio to talk about this weekend's concert, I am joined by the one and only David Moroz. Hey, David, it's good to have you here.
Glad to be back, Chris.
So one of the things I noticed about this Sunday's program is that aside from the Leclerc Sonata, the three works that you are playing in were written in the first 25 years of the 20th century. And all of these pieces have tons of variety of characters and styles. Was this planned? I mean, like you could have just easily done a Beethoven or a Mozart sonata. How did the concert come together?
Well, I think we'd been dreaming about the ideal program for two violins and piano for a long time. And we wanted to find the right combination of solos and duos and, I guess, trios or trio, and we came up with this order and this repertoire, and I think it's a lovely program.
It absolutely is. Now, I have to ask about the Leclerc sonata for two violins. Gwen and Carl are going to be performing one of the Leclerc sonatas. This is off their album of 6 sonatas for two violins that came out in 2018. For you, as Gwen's husband, you must know these sonatas probably better than any non-violinist around. What was it like hearing Leclerc's music all the time leading up to the recordings? And what are these sonatas like?
Well, it's fantastic music, you know. They are very evenly balanced pieces. So if you like, you can choose your favorite fiddler and just watch them and listen to them all the way through. Or you can listen to the interplay between the two, or you know, there's just wonderful stuff going on all the time.
So I have to ask, so you've got the Ravel sonata, and then you've got the Prokofiev 5 melodies. Who's going to be playing what? Is it going to be Gwen for both, or have they divided up duties?
No, Gwen is going to play the Ravel sonata, and Carl and I will play Prokofiev, and then the three of us will be together for the last work on the program, the Moshkovsky. I want to start with the Prokofiev 5 melodies. They were written in Paris in 1925, originally for voice and then arranged for violin. Have you ever played them with a singer? And one of the other things I'm wondering is, do you think Prokofiev's musical ideas come across clearer with the possibilities that violin adds to the music? I'm thinking here in particular of trills, harmonics, double stops. Well, I mean, it is very idiosyncratically written for the fiddle. But, you know, I hate to do this, but I have to correct you. These pieces were, in fact, not written in Paris, but they were written in California, of all places.
Okay.
You know, Prokofiev is categorized, I guess, as a Soviet composer. So you wouldn't expect that he would ever find his way to the US of A, and especially not California. But he did actually think about living in the United States for a little while. And he ended up in California for a bit, but it didn't really work out for him in the States. So then he moved back to Paris, he moved to Paris, but a few months after moving, he had a tour in the United States. So he was back.
Right.
Then he was in California, and then he wrote these pieces. So it's a very curious history of these works. I mean, they were originally for soprano and piano, and Prokofiev premiered them in New York. But then I guess he thought maybe that he could get a little more mileage out of it as a set of pieces for violin and piano, and that's how the rearrangement came about.
And have you ever played them with a singer?
I have never done them with a singer, no. And I'm not so sure that they're very popular with singers, but they are. They're kind of a 20th century staple of violinists.
Yeah. There's so much contrast between the 5 pieces, and I think it's one of the things that makes them so interesting. As a pianist, can you talk about some of the things that you have to think about when you're playing these pieces with the violinist?
Well, I think you always have to figure out which part is leading at what time. I mean, that's what chamber music is all about. And when you're not leading, you're supporting. right? So since these were originally conceived for voice and piano, of course the melodic line, which is generally in the violin, is the most important. The piano has sort of an atmospheric responsibility. You know, you were saying these pieces, they are very, very different from one another, and they're just strangely wonderful. I think a little bit about the fact that movies were just starting to be popular.
Yeah, right.
And they sound a little bit like movies for a silent film track.
Yeah.
You know, but, you know, a European silent film track. No vaudeville comedies or anything like that. It's something very, very unusual and weird and wonderful.
Yeah, there's some great harmonies, and especially there's a really interesting harmonic language in the piano. I was listening to them with the score this morning. It's fascinating.
Yeah, the piano part is particularly very, very dense, but wonderful.
Mm-hmm. I want to turn to the Ravel Sonata. Here, every movement is different. For me, the first movement is very impressionistic and has influence of Orientalism. You've got the bluesiness of the second movement, and then you've got that perpetual motion final movement. There's so many wonderful colors that Ravel writes for both instruments. Is it hard to create the different colors that Ravel requires? I mean, here it's not just notes, rhythms, and dynamics. As a pianist, you've got to be careful to create these different moods. It's an extra part of the musical equation, right?
Well, you know, the Ravel sonata every sonata has its own particular difficulties. Ravel, I think, was a bit concerned. He didn't think actually that the two instruments blended very well. So he wanted to bring across maybe the contrasts between the two instruments more than trying necessarily for a homogeneous whole.
Right.
And the blues movement particularly, I think, underlines that because throughout the piece, both the piano and the violin, most of the time they're playing in a different key.
Right.
And this is, you know, when you think about it, you know, maybe a violinist and a pianist, if they're playing a piece together, should play in the same key. Ravel approaches the problem, you know, from the other direction and says, well, maybe they should be playing in a different key. And it works, of course, it's perfectly. I mean, it's the most beautifully crafted movement. But like I said, there is this concept of bitonality, right, that is really quite striking.
Yeah, and I mean, the sonata is heavily influenced by jazz, right?
Well, he wrote it after he had heard jazz for the first time, and it's not an earthy blues piece like you might hear coming from Tennessee.
Yeah.
But it's a very sophisticated French blues, you know. So that's what the audience can expect to hear.
Mm-hmm. And you've got that perpetual motion final movement, which is
the finale is staggering. You know, it's just brilliant.
Yeah, actually, every time I hear the final movement to Ravel's G major sonata, I always think of the final movement of the Ravel piano concerto. I hear, for me, I always hear similarities.
For sure. It's the same key, after all.
Yeah, absolutely. The third piece that you're going to be playing on the program is the Moszkowski Suite in G minor for two violins and piano. This is a piece I'd never heard before. We were talking off air. I listened to it for the first time this morning with the score. Thank you, YouTube. One of the things that struck me, first of all, was it's a very charming piece, but there's this amazing counterpoint between the two violins, but also the piano. Can you talk about this piece a little bit, and where did you discover it?
Well, you know, Moszkowski is primarily known nowadays as a pianist and a composer for piano. All of my students at university are assigned an etude or two by him over the course of their years with me. But what people might not know is that when he entered university, I mean, he entered as a pianist, but he was also a very good violinist, and he sat in the first violin section of his university's orchestra. So he knew how to get around the fiddle. And played it quite well. So what's curious about this piece is when violinists will play it. I mean, when they first encounter it, I think they might know Moszkowski's reputation as a pianist, but they're surprised at just how well it seems to lie under the fingers for a violinist. So it's really a virtuoso piece for 3 players.
Which sort of leads to the next question. Is it hard to put together? I'm just thinking of that lickety-split final movement where you're very often thinking 1 to a bar for a good portion of it.
Well, that's the key. It is 1 to a bar, and we're all at the same 1 to a bar. So it works out fine. It is fast, and it's fun. It's exhilarating to play. And then, there's a little pause about 45 seconds before the end, and it gets a little faster.
And there's that crazy coda.
Yeah, that's what we do. And it's fun. Yeah.
David, the concert sounds like it's going to be fantastic. How much are tickets, and where can people go to get tickets?
Well, nowadays, it's easiest to buy tickets online. Our website has a couple of buttons that you can push and make an e-transfer, and your tickets are taken care of. Ticket prices, as I recall, are for adults are $25. For students, they're $15. And the concert starts at 7:30 on Sunday.
Yeah, and for our Classic 107 listeners, I'll embed a direct link into the article that's up on our website, classic107.com, that has a direct link to the Winnipeg Chamber Music Society's website.
Thanks,
for
Chris.
tickets. David, as always, this has been so much fun talking about this Sunday's concert. All the best. And thanks so much for taking the time to stop by and chat with me again today.